Welcome back to Strange Resort, the podcast that lurks in the shadows of otherwise sunny vacation destinations. I am your host, George Hatfield, and right now, I am behind the wheel of my reliable rental car as I cruise through the desert. If you listened to the last episode, then you know that I have just completed a week of unsuccessful ghost hunting at the Walking Box Ranch. Although I was around when a construction crew dug up a Cadillac with a few dead gangsters inside from the 1980s. So I would call that a success, and it's all thanks to my contact at the Bureau of Land Management, Jamie Phelps. Which reminds me, I should probably send him a little thank you text as I stop at this eclectic gas station to fill up my tank. Hey, Jamie, Walking Box Ranch was unforgettable. Thank you so much. No problem, muchacho. You should come visit me in Desperation. I'll be here for 2 or 3 more days. Jamie is a very nice guy in spite of his lack of punctuation. Guess what? I'm already headed that way, period. See you this afternoon. Back on the road now, I am excited to visit the infamous ghost town of Desperation. But then again, maybe I shouldn't be. Over the years, I have spent the night in haunted hotel rooms and spooky old mansions where one or sometimes 2 people have met a violent and untimely end. But Desperation, Nevada is different because in the mid-1990s, every townsperson was, well, how do I explain this so it doesn't sound so brutal and triggering? Let's just say that every townsperson was unalived, that it was an accident. Something having to do with fumes or toxins emitted from a mine shaft. Supposedly, that toxic gas ended the life of the entire population of the town. Not to mention livestock, wildlife. Hundreds of people, thousands of animals died within the city limits of Desperation over the course of a 4 to 5 day period. And all the while, emergency services were completely unaware. Desperation was once a colorful little town with a rich history going back to the 1800s, but now it is an area of ruin and decay, shrouded in secrets and fenced off from the general public. But thanks to my friend in the Bureau, I'm going to meet up with an esteemed anthropologist named Professor Roger Finham, and I am hoping that the 3 of us will get to the bottom of Desperation once and for all. We may never know what really happened in Desperation. As I said, the official narrative is that an unknown toxin was released during a mining operation run by the Diablo Mining Corporation. But if that is true, the poison was not responsible for every death. One person in particular, Collier Intragian, at least according to authorities, was exposed to the toxic gas and it drove him insane, resulting in the deaths of innocent civilians. The news media at the time did report this tragedy, and the nation was shocked and saddened, albeit mildly, and then the world moved on. However, autopsies of the victims were never released, and over the years, rumors and conspiracy theories have developed. There are those who refuse to believe the poison gas theory. Instead, some opt for a different theory, or perhaps I should say a different legend, a ghost story. there are those who believe that devastation came to desperation as payback for the terrible deeds which took place in the mid-1800s. Back when Desperation was a thriving mining town, brimming with saloons, restaurants, and brothels, populated by gamblers, crooked businessmen, and of course, prospectors hoping to strike it rich. During the height of the gold and silver rushes, thousands of Chinese immigrants traveled from California eastward to Nevada looking for work, and many of them found that opportunity in this dusty little town hidden away within the Desitoya mountain range. According to historians, the Chinese men and women were welcome at first because more hands were needed. But as precious metals became more and more scarce, many of the white miners became jealous. They felt their livelihoods were threatened, and in some cases, their prejudice exploded into violence. You can learn more about one of the worst examples of this by exploring the Rock Springs Massacre, which took place in Wyoming in 1885, and led to the death of at least 28 immigrant Chinese. That incident has been well documented by historians, unlike the tragedy that took place in the Rattlesnake Mine in Desperation in 1859. In this booming Nevada town, if a Chinese worker was caught pocketing a scrap of gold, they could be shot on sight. No arrest, no trial, simply executed point blank. The Diablo's most prosperous operation was a shaft or drift called Rattlesnake No. 1. It sloped down into the earth, down 150 to 200 feet below. On September 21st, 1859, 10 minutes past 1 p.m., there was a massive cave-in. Reports vary as to how many were in the mine at the time. Some say anywhere from 40 people to 100, mostly men, but also some women, and almost all of them were Chinese immigrants, with the exception of 4 white males who worked as overseers or engineers. It was the exit portion of the mine that had collapsed. Most of the miners apparently survived that initial cave-in. According to some historians, the president and vice president of the Diablo Mining Corporation arrived at the site 2 days later. They could still hear the screams and pleas of the people trapped behind the rubble. Instead of attempting a rescue, the company decided that they could save a lot of trouble and money by destroying the entire mine and crushing the remaining workers. Rumor has it that this decision to extinguish the lives of scores of Chinese immigrants occurred while the president and vice president had a picnic lunch outside the mine. Soon after that decision, dynamite was lit, an explosion occurred, and all screams stopped. The town believed that everyone down in the mine had perished, but they were wrong. 14 days later, after the massacre in the mine, 2 men walked into Desperation, stripped down to loincloths, their hair ragged, their skin burnt, covered with dried blood. They were the Lushan brothers, Qian and Chai. The story goes that they survived the collapse and somehow emerged from the rubble. Then, on October 7th, 1859, the 2 men, almost naked but equipped with the guns of their dead foreman, shambled into the Lucky Day Saloon. They raised their guns to fire in a deranged attempt at vengeance. But the white men of the Lucky Day were faster on the draw. Shai was gunned down in the middle of the saloon. Qian was taken alive, though badly beaten. He was in a prison cell for 2 days, and then, with no apparent trial, he was hanged in the middle of Desperation's Main Street. Leading up to this execution, Qian raved in a language that no one could understand. It was not Mandarin or Cantonese. Some said that it was the language of the Weixin, an evil earth spirit from the depths. Most believed that the gibberish he was speaking was a symptom of pure madness. And why not madness? Qian had lost everything and everyone, including his fiancée, who was crushed in the mine collapse. After the townsfolk witnessed the execution of the last Lushan brother, immigrants began moving away in droves, searching for more tolerant settlements. The Diablo Mining Company never recovered the remains of the dead, so many people believe that restless and tormented spirits lurk within the ruined shafts, still crying out in the darkness, waiting for another chance to get revenge. And perhaps that explains what happened in 1996, when disaster struck again, and this time claimed the lives of over 200 souls. I'm anxious to find out whether or not these tragedies were in fact a product of a man-made accident, an effect of Mother Nature, or something more sinister, more supernatural. I am at the border of this forbidden relic of a town. Barricades block the road, and there's a chain-link fence. There are a lot of warning signs, but this is not what I would call a top security facility. The signal is spotty out here, next to Desperation, but I am able to let my friend know that I've arrived. I'm here. A few moments later, I get a text from Jamie Phelps. We must have just missed each other. I had to go away for a while, but you are in good hands with RF. He will be your guide, TAK. Well, at least his punctuation is improved. Not sure what TAK stands for. Thanks and kindness? That's probably it. I'll send my contact another text. Should I wait at the gate for Prof. Phenom? No, come inside. He's waiting for you. All right, it is official. We have permission from the Bureau of Land Management. And so we will now enter the ruins of Desperation. Once upon a time, the people who lived in this community celebrated Pioneer Days on Main Street. They played games of chance in their rinky-dink casino, and after a hard day's work, they drank beer and listened to country music in their 90s version of a saloon called the Broken Drum. But now, there is only a dead husk of a town.
Who are you? Why are you here?
I'm startled by this voice and turn around to take a snapshot of who I assume is the anthropologist I'm supposed to meet.
Oh, hi. Are you Professor Phenom?
As I offer to shake hands, he jerks away from me, fear in his eyes.
Who are you?
I notice his hat. He has a strange slip of yellow paper tucked in the band, a yellow card.
I'm George Hatfield. Mr. Phelps, Jamie Phelps invited me here to meet with you.
You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be here. None of this should be here.
He runs down the alley.
Professor Phenom?
I follow. I dash around the corner, hoping to reason with him or calm him down. But he's gone. vanished. The only sound is this. A key. It must have fallen out of his pocket. An old-fashioned hotel room key, the kind you might find in the 1950s. It says, Derry Town Home, Room 316.
Professor Fenham? Professor?
What the hell are you shouting for? I'm right here.
Now there's someone new, and fortunately, he doesn't look like a crazy person.
Oh, hi. Are you Roger Fenham?
Last time I checked.
Oh, good. I'm George Hatfield.
Nice to meet you. Phelps told me a lot of great things about you.
Oh, well, can't be that good. I'm just a humble podcaster looking for a story.
Well, you are right in the middle of one, mister. Desperation's full of stories, and all of them tragic.
Well, I'd love to hear what you've been working on.
Come on, let's walk and talk. Let me know if you have any questions.
I do have questions. A lot of them. But the things I am most curious about are the events leading up to the tragedy of 1996, the disaster that eliminated the population of the entire town.
Well, it wasn't toxic gas, wasn't an explosion. It was a series of events that started small, like a drop of blood in a pond filled with piranha.
He tells me a tale not for the faint of heart, one that he has pieced together himself from the unpublished police reports, which he had somehow gained access to. It begins sometime in the middle of June 1996. Professor Fenham says he isn't certain about the exact date the violence began.
But if I had to guess, I'd say June 19th.
For over a century, the Diablo Corporation owned the mining rights to the Rattlesnake Shaft. By the late 20th century, the mining technology had advanced enough so that digging for copper and other mineral leavings became both possible and profitable. Kirk Turner was the crew boss in a mining operation consisting of almost 90 employees. They had been a part of a years-long operation, responsible for digging an enormous hole, not unlike a reverse pyramid, known as the China Pit. That morning in June, a round of explosions unearthed a macabre discovery. They uncovered the lost Rattlesnake Shaft. It turned out not all of the mines had collapsed. Turner and his men realized they had made a potentially significant archaeological discovery. They glimpsed the skeletal remains of the Rattlesnake Shaft victims from 1859, and something else.
That's where they discovered an artifact of immense power, a Kantar.
Is this Kantar, is that like a Native American legend?
It's older than that.
It's not from the Book of Mormon, is it?
Let me just finish the damn story.
Sorry.
Kirk Turner then informed the pit foreman, Kerry Ripton, about the discovery, and the shaft is sealed off, restricted as per regulations of MSHA. But then something inexplicable happened. Late that evening, after the workers had shut down their equipment and had gone home, Kerry Ripton investigated the shaft all on his own, ignoring his own rules and regulations. The professor goes on to explain that whatever the artifact was, it emitted an immense and corrupting power. Now, perhaps the source of that power could simply have been called greed, the desire to keep the discovery of these priceless relics all to oneself. Or maybe there was some sort of poisonous gas in the mine after all, some sort of neurological toxin that affected Ripton's behavior, because Kerry Ripton did something very out of character. He left the mine, and he went directly to the house of Kirk Turner, and at 2 a.m. he entered that house and killed Turner and Turner's wife. He shot them both in their sleep. That night, Ripton killed 6 more crew members, each one in their home or their apartment, some stabbed, some shot. These were all men who had been part of the discovery of the rattlesnake shaft, which would lead one to assume that Ripton, in fact, wanted to keep the secret of the mine shaft and the artifacts to himself.
Quite the opposite. He wanted to share those Kantas.
During his killing spree, Ripton placed dozens, if not hundreds, of artifacts, what Professor Finham calls Kantas, demonic little animal sculptures made of an unknown mineral substance. Perhaps radioactive, because, as we will see, it seems to sicken those who come in contact with them. In addition to this, the massacre continued, and it was not only focused on the workers of the mine. Ripton also began killing any stray animal or pet he could find. Days after this tragedy occurred, authorities would eventually come to find not only human remains, but the remains of many animals nailed to signs and telephone poles. Authorities would also find Ripton's body. The autopsy report indicates that he died of severe hemorrhaging. Ripton had vomited gallons of blood, much of which the forensic team found in his vehicle. More than this, Ripton's body was riddled with enormous tumors, as if he had been ravaged by cancer overnight. But before the sickness ended his life, Kerry Ripton took the lives of 25 more men. The morning crew who arrived at the China Pit. This was on a Saturday morning, and the men arrived in pairs and singles, and Ripton dispatched them with his shotgun at close range. Then he hid the bodies behind the field office. By 10 a.m., Ripton had bled out. Oh, and there is one more strange detail that Professor Finham tells me about regarding the autopsy report.
Kerry Ripton's corpse, laid out on the morgue slab, was 7 feet 2 inches. Now that's a huge man, but according to his driver's license, he was only 5'11".
Thus, the giant fell, responsible for over 30 deaths. And the rest of the townsfolk at this time have no idea what has occurred. With Ripton dead, the violence should have been over, but it wasn't. Brad Josephson, an amateur photographer, went down into the China Pit, perhaps because he was tricked into going there, we'll never know. But these photos from Josephson's camera recovered at the scene of the crime reveal a deranged Kerry Ripton in action. It seems he was holding Brad hostage shortly before death overtook him, as if the curse transferred from Ripton to Josephson. The amateur photographer took the dead foreman's shotgun and his Buick and headed to the municipal building in the middle of Desperation. There, he killed the 2 law enforcement officers on duty. Police Chief James Reed was shot sitting in his office chair. His pants were around his ankles. And it seems that much of the rest of the town at this time was also behaving in bizarre ways, sometimes violent, sometimes sexual. Because at this point in the narrative, according to Professor Finham, the artifacts scattered throughout the town have created a disturbing effect upon the ecosystem, and the surrounding wildlife swarmed down upon the town like a plague. In one of the homes of Desperation, a family of 4, including a toddler, were found dead at their breakfast table. Autopsies showed that each family member had been repeatedly bitten by brown recluse spiders. Other bodies would reveal signs of injury inflicted by hawks, buzzards, coyotes, scorpions. And yet, despite this, there was never a call of emergency to an outside authority. We don't know how many people Brad Josephson killed before he died of a massive heart attack, but it must have been in the dozens. And many of his victims were hid in a workshop called Hernando's Hideaway. And then there were the remains of Frank Geller, chief mining engineer. His dismembered hand was found floating in a fish aquarium. But even with the second spree killer dead, the chaos did not stop. Officer Collier Intragian, known around town as Collie, was outside of Desperation when the initial violence took place. It was believed, though never confirmed, that he had spent Sunday night with a girlfriend on the Shoshone Reservation. One would like to believe that when Intragian arrived in town on Monday morning, he would have done anything to stop the madness, but instead he joined it. Instead of witnessing the devastation that has wrought his town and stopping the insanity, Officer Intragian goes on a rampage of his own, as if picking up the demonic baton and continuing the evil work, just as Josephson drops dead from his heart attack. Unfortunately, the first two spree killers will pale in comparison to the massacre that the sheriff will inflict upon the unsuspecting residents of this remote Nevada town. But that part of this community's last gasp is so disturbing that it warrants its own episode. And so, if you want to find out more about this bizarre and bloody sheriff, you'll have to tune in for part 2 of this strange resort special, Destination Desperation. In the meantime, Professor Finham has suggested that we go to the municipal building. He wants to show me the jail cells where the few survivors of this tragedy were held captive. And he's also hinted that he has a special surprise. He may have found one of these relics that we've been hearing so much about. But I will believe it when I see it. Until then, this is George Hatfield.
You won't be for long.
Excuse me?